Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to share with you some thoughts on delayed academics and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing for your child. And really, no one thing is going to be all good or all bad for a person, but at least you can understand some of the pros and cons regarding delayed academics. Now, I'm a big believer of delayed academics, and I know that my child isn't going to know everything that he needs to know by the time he graduates from high school, but my focus is mainly on creating a love of learning, an ability to learn, and understanding the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic. So everything else is extra, in my opinion, for our purpose in our homeschool. But there is some perks to delaying academics, and the main one that I want to talk about today is the ease of learning when you do delay. So when you wait a little bit longer to introduce an academic concept, what ends up happening is that your child is generally already exposed to that in one way or another through life, through living, through just interacting with family members and friends and other things that he may do, so that by the time you actually get to doing those academics, it's usually not a surprise. It's something that he may already have some familiarity with, and also because he's older, chances are it'll be a little bit easier. So I see this in a couple of different ways with my children. I could spend many years teaching reading or addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. I could start when they're really young and work on it every day or a few times a week consistently over the course of a few years. And we would need to spend a lot of time doing that, especially if we're starting when the child is really young. By the time that child is proficient, it turns out it's roughly the same age that if you had waited and introduced that concept at that point, your child will go from not knowing it to being proficient in such a small space of time that it will be the same grade level or same time as that other child. Now, this is proficiency, not introduction. All right, so that's a difference, because you're like, well, you didn't introduce multiplication when he was in second grade or third grade or fourth grade, but later on he understands it really well, but he wasn't introduced to it before. Whereas another child is in second, third, or fourth grade and has that familiarity with that, but isn't proficient in it. So that's where I'm separating the two. By the time that both children are proficient in that skill, it's roughly the same age, whether you wait or whether you delay. Now, there's a lot of information out there, a lot of evidence out there to support this, and though I don't have all the information here handy on my own, this is not an original idea. I gathered this from other resources, other professionals, as well as my own experience. All right, so that's great. If you're homeschooling, you certainly have the flexibility to delay academics if you wish. But what if you're not delaying academics because your child is either in school or you're only homeschooling for a limited period of time and then you want to send your child back to school? Well, that's where delaying academics may have a couple of hurdles. But let's try to work through them, because I still have suggestions if it's really in your heart to delay academics. I read a book once, and I am sorry that I don't have the title of the book, but it was regarding teenagers, high school students, and media and electronics, not so much media, but proficiency in computers. And it was talking about some inner city kids that hadn't had the same resources as some of the other students in the school. So some of these other students in the school had been exposed to either computers or programming or the internet or whatever, just had familiarity with it. Whereas these other students did not. And they entered into this high school and didn't know what the other students knew, and within a couple of months they were already on par with the other students who had been exposed and had been learning these ideas for months or years. So when you are waiting long enough to introduce any kind of skill or information, chances are the later you do, the faster your child is going to learn it and understand it and become proficient in it. Now, the perk in waiting as well is that you can hopefully increase the love of learning, and I'll explain this a little bit further, and also you diminish the possibility of your child thinking that she isn't smart or thinking that he can't do it, or having just low self-esteem academically, because when you introduce something too soon and a child can't do it, you create this negative feedback. Like, here's information that I should learn or should know, and I can't do it. I can't do it without your help. And even when I get your help, I don't understand it, and I keep having to struggle through it. And for me, the struggle is absolutely important, but I don't feel that it's appropriate for a young student who's still developing an understanding of his abilities and learning in general and of the world. Like, I feel like that's better suited a little bit later. What I would rather have for my child is an enthusiasm for learning, a love of learning, and a mindset where he feels like he can achieve it and he can do it. Now, there are a couple of pitfalls along the way, and I'm going to share those with you in a little bit, but I want to return back to where delaying academics may have its cons, I guess, where it may not be right for your family. If you are pulling your student out of public school or private school for a very short period of time to homeschool or get a tutor, and then you plan on reintroducing your student back into the school system, then straying far from the, sorry for the interruption, but straying far from the traditional academics is probably not going to be in your child's best interest, especially if that time away from school is very short, because you will have, there is a deschooling period of time as it is, and in that time and just trying to find your way and then you have to go right back into school, it's a little bit disruptive and it might not be the best thing for your child. In that case, you may choose just to continue along with the academics and the method that was already being done in school and just recreate that to the best of your ability at home until you can have your child be reintegrated into the school system. Another time where you may choose not to delay academics is if, again, homeschooling is temporary, but also if you simply do not have it in your heart to do this. Suppose you're gonna homeschool for kindergarten, first grade, and you know that you're gonna send your child to second grade. You may choose not to delay academics because you already know, I'm gonna send him to second grade. I really don't want him to be behind, and I don't really know about this whole delayed academics. Then absolutely go ahead and stick more closely to the traditional form of schooling, because if you anticipate there being an emotional, trauma of entering a public school and not knowing what the other students know, then definitely go ahead and stick more closely to the traditional academics. I entered the public school system here in the US as a second grader. I was born in France and went to a Waldorf school there until second grade. So coming into the school system here, it was really different. There was a language barrier. I mean, I knew how to speak English, but I was still like speaking French and speaking English. It was very confusing. I didn't know how to read. I didn't understand the concept of a spelling test because we just didn't have that in our school, in a Waldorf school in general, and also I came from a different country. So there was this period of like really not knowing what was going on and having like this anxiety of like, oh my gosh, you want me to write down 5 words? Like, really, my first spelling test, like, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. It was a little bit frightening. So if you really don't want that for your child, and I have to say, like, obviously, I did okay. Learned how to read and write and do math, and went to college, so totally fine that there was those little transition. But if you don't want that for your child, then you might forego delaying academics or forego doing something that's really different from the traditional public school method or private school method if you intend to send your kids back to school. So here's what I've noticed in my experience regarding delayed academics. It's two things. Number one, we are already following loosely a Waldorf curriculum, which is about a year behind, in my opinion, from the traditional school curriculum. Grade 1 starts at 7, whereas you can be 6 in first grade here. So you're already waiting a little bit longer, which allows the child to develop just a little bit more before being introduced in a more gentle way, the academics. In a Waldorf school, it's a little bit different, it's a little bit slower, but obviously by the time you're graduating, everybody is up to speed, actually far sooner. So when my children, when my oldest started kindergarten, we were a little bit confused as to how we were going to go about doing this, and that's a story for a whole other video. But what I noticed was that he really wasn't either enjoying or ready for any kind of academics the way that the school was wanting. Eventually we left that homeschool program and joined a new homeschool program, and still by first grade that just wasn't working for him either. Both of these school programs were public school programs, which means that you do need to stick pretty closely to the state standards and to the progress that they are expecting. These were programs where all the materials were given to you and you basically did public school at home. By the middle of first grade, we left all of those programs and completely homeschooled independently, and it changed our life. And it was slow going, regaining the love of learning. We really, both of us, had just really disliked homeschooling and school and academics from our original experience. After a while, we regained that love of learning and we got back into a more natural way of doing things in our home. But he still wasn't ready to read, and I was okay with it because I knew, well, he's got a little time. He has till 7, he has till 8. Well, this child really tested us because he just wasn't going to learn to read, even with the delayed academics that a Waldorf school tends to have. It's not a ton delayed, but it is a little bit. So he could decode a few words here and there, but he did not read proficiently or fluently an entire book until about a month before he turned 11. So you're thinking that's crazy, right? He didn't know how to read when he was in first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade. Learn how to read. Guess what? The book that he read happened to be 5th grade level. So he went from not knowing to being proficient in that skill to the point where he was on par with his peers at that point, where they were proficient with it. He was reading that grade level book at the same time they were. He didn't have to struggle through all those years before, especially if he wasn't ready for it in an environment that may have compromised his love of learning and maybe would have made him feel like insufficient or incapable or just, you know, not able to do this, not able to do the academics. This hasn't just happened once. This continues to happen in our homeschool. So my personal belief on this is that I would rather take the path of least struggle when it comes to academics, because I know they will get it, and why not just wait until they're really ripe and it comes together really quickly with the least amount of angst. So I wait and I try, and if it's not working, we put it aside and we try again. Now sometimes I know my kids are ready, and I'm going to share a story that's a little bit more recent. And I knew that my son was ready for a math concept, but he was giving me such attitude. And I knew that this was his process. It didn't come to him right away. He needed to be explained a couple of steps. And he was frustrated by the process. And I knew that his frustration and attitude were not a sign of not readiness. They were his process. And as unkind as it is to be on the receiving end of the attitude, I was patient and I understood what was going on. Literally less than 24 hours, and that skill went from non-existent to proficient. And I was like, just, you had to just be patient, had to hold your breath, you just had to wait. So there was a little bit of gosh, I don't even know how to describe the emotion that my son went through. It was not like I'm not ready for it, but more of a frustration on his part for not understanding it on his own, possibly. So sometimes you have to really know whether or not your child is ready based on more than just the cues. And this is really something that's a parenting art that you will learn, and we've all made a ton of mistakes doing this. I, wasn't here sharing these experiences with you 15 years ago, 14 years ago, when my first was young, to go through like really a more authentic journey. You're seeing this after I've had so much more experience than I had before, to know that it's going to be okay. Obviously there are times when it's not, and in your heart you have to know and learn to identify those situations where there is something going on, either medically or academically or emotionally or socially, or something is going on that's preventing your child from progressing, and that needs to be dealt with separate from the academic situation, because those things don't just impact academics, they can impact that child's whole life. So definitely go with your gut on things that you are feeling like not right about when it comes to a desire not to learn, an apathy towards education. Those things are things that you want to look out for. However, if your child has come from a different school system into homeschooling, don't forget there is that deschooling period, and what may look like apathy towards school could just be transition. So try not to misinterpret transition and apathy, because those are two different things. The transition from one school to another, either from homeschool to public school or from public school to homeschool, looks a variety of ways, from boredom to attitude to indifference towards school. Like, you're gonna see a lot of different emotions during that transition, but that's part of the transition. Alright, so I hope that these tips reassure you if you choose to delay academics, and that I really, really firmly believe that all children can succeed, and that when we try to put all kids within one standard, it's just not going to match each child, and it's really not a matter of the child not matching the standard, it's a matter of the standard not matching the children. So know in your heart that your child can succeed. I don't know an older and post-puberty child is what I mean by older. I don't know an older child who isn't capable of learning, who doesn't want to learn. Like, they want to, and the only times that they don't is if in some way they have been made to think that they are not capable. So if you are pulling an older child out of school and into homeschool, there may be an emotional transition that needs to be dealt with, because children need to know that they are capable, that they have the ability, and that learning can be fun. Alright, so I know that you guys have suggestions and experiences regarding delayed academics, and I'd love to hear about them in the comment section below. It's almost like a street sweeper. Can you hear that? But it is a street sweeper. Good thing I was done.